Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a librarian at the Port Orange Regional Library, and I have a very special guest today. Today I have Ryan Chabot. He is a Volusia County employee just like me, and he is, I'm going to have to read this to make sure I get it right, the Sea Turtle Habitat Conservation Plan Program Manager. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Can you tell me what is a Sea Turtle Habitat Conservation Plan Program Manager?
So generally, we wear a lot of hats in our office, so we're kind of in charge of making sure that we have all the environmental protections we need in place on our beach environment as we have our tourists and residents using our beach each day. We also have sea turtles, shorebirds, seabirds, and a bunch of other wildlife species that are that call the beach home just like we do.
So you're in charge of making sure that everybody's safe.
Correct, yeah.
What can you tell me about sea turtles? I don't know a whole lot other than I've seen the signs that say they're nesting. Is there a certain season for sea turtles?
There is. So generally sea turtles spend about 99% of their lifetime in the water, but kind of in the times during the year that we would interact with them most is when they're coming up for that 1% of the other time onto the beaches. So generally, sea turtles are long-lived, late-maturing reptiles, and so what that means is that a nesting female will be in wherever her foraging area happens to be. It could be North Carolina, it could be the Bahamas, it could be Cuba, it could be off the coast of Florida, and every few years she'll build up enough energy reserves that she decides it's time to migrate and to nest. So she'll migrate back to the nesting beach generally that she hatched from, using both visual and auditory and olfactory cues, as well as using the magnetic field of the earth to migrate back. And when she arrives, she'll lay between about 4 to 6 nests in a season every couple of weeks, and she'll lay about 100 eggs per nest. And she'll leave, and that's the extent of the parental care that she provides her offspring. And so then about 40 to 60 days later, all of those eggs will kind of hatch at once, make their way up to the surface, and run down to the water and try to make their way past all the predators that may be waiting for them out in the water line to get out to the sargassum seaweed lines offshore, where they'll spend a few years kind of getting bigger, escaping predators, eating whatever they can find, and then eventually recruiting back closer to shore, where they will spend the next anywhere from a few years all the way up to a couple decades of their life until they're an adult themselves and have their own established foraging area and make their migrations back to nesting beaches and starting the process all over again.
Wow. So they do try to come to the same beach they were born.
Correct. Yeah, it's not precise, but it's really pretty close, within the same county probably most of the time.
How many sea turtles nests do we usually get here in Volusia County? So
for Volusia County, this past year we had a little bit over 900 nests. So we typically will have under 1,000 nests per year, and those are typically comprised of 3 different species, and then sometimes a 4th species. What species comes to Volusia County? So our most common species that we have nesting on our beaches are loggerhead sea turtles. And so loggerheads are kind of the emblematic sea turtle of Florida, if you will. So Florida hosts about 90% of the loggerhead nesting in the United States. So they're really important for us here. And they get their name because they have really big heads. And so to give people an example, I often will point towards, if you take your two, kind of your index and your middle finger and put it right next to your jaw and just kind of make like a chewing motion, you'll feel one of the muscles in your jaw that's used for chewing. And so loggerheads have muscles that they use to chew that are about as big as your forearm or even your whole arm, and they use those really powerful muscles to eat mostly hard-shelled organisms that live on the seafloor, like conchs and clams and whelks and a lot of other things that live in shells. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then our second most common species we have nesting on the beach are green turtles. They're a little bit bigger than loggerheads, so loggerheads as adults will be about 250 to 300 pounds. Green turtles will be about 300 to 350 pounds. And green turtles are the one of the species that was primarily hunted for their meat, and they're called green turtles because, like flamingos who eat shrimp and their feathers are pink, the fat that green turtles have underneath their skin is green from eating mostly algae and sea grasses as adults. And so they are the vegetarians of the sea turtle world, for the lack of a better term. And then finally, our third nester that we have most commonly on the beach are leatherbacks. So leatherbacks are what you would think of if you wanted to find the dinosaur of the sea turtle world. So unlike the hard-shelled turtles like loggerheads and green turtles and all the other sea turtle species in the world that are in one family, leatherbacks are in their own separate family. And so to put that in perspective for people, it's leatherbacks are as different from the other sea turtle species as your cat is from your dog. So they have completely different anatomy, physiology, rather than having kind of a hard bony shell that's covered with keratin, the stuff that makes up your fingernails and your hair. They'll have a bunch of really, really tiny, intricate bones underneath a leathery covering instead of a hard shell. And one of the reasons why they have this adaptation is because they primarily eat jellyfish and other gelatinous prey. So they'll go really far out deep in the ocean and they'll dive to really deep depths, sometimes to depths even beyond where light can penetrate the surface. And so because they don't have that hard shell, their body can kind of expand and compress with the changes in pressure as they go up and down. Whereas something like a loggerhead, its shell would crack at those really deep depths. Leatherbacks are also huge. So adults can be between 800 and 1,400 pounds. The biggest individual was a male off the coast of Wales that weighed 2,000 pounds. Wow. So when they come up on the beach to nest, it almost looks like someone drove a Volkswagen Beetle up on the beach.
When they come up to nest, do they come? I assume they come at night, typically.
Yes.
I've never seen a sea turtle on the beach.
Oh yeah, so most of the adult females, they'll come up at night. So typically after the sun sets, all the way up to the sun rising again. That's kind of the peak window for them, and it can be twofold. So one is they're cold-blooded animals, and so if they came up in the middle of the day during the nesting season, which is May 1st to October 31st of each year, that's kind of our hottest time of the year. So they probably would overheat a little bit. And it also helps them evade any predators that may be trying to either find them or find their eggs. And so the females will come out of the water and kind of take a look around and move forward. And if they like what they see, they'll keep continuing to move forward and eventually kind of push some sand aside in a spot they've identified. Use their hind flippers, almost like if you had a mitten on, and they'll reach down into the sand, kind of pull up a bit of sand and flick it off to the side, and then do the same thing with their other flipper back and forth until they make an upside down light bulb shaped egg chamber in which they'll deposit their around 100 eggs, and then they'll use their back flippers to kind of bring sand back, fill in their hole. They'll kind of rock back and forth to put some pressure on it and make a little ceiling around that egg chamber. And then they'll use their front flippers to throw sand around in different patterns to kind of camouflage their nest and maybe confuse potential predators that may be trying to find where their eggs are. The one exception, generally one of the exceptions to that, and actually a species that we sometimes have nesting on our beach, are Kemp's ridleys, which they're the smallest sea turtle species. They're about 90 pounds as adults. And they like to come out and nest in the middle of the day on the conditions that folks probably wouldn't be going out to the beach in. So they like coming up to nest on really rainy, overcast, windy, kind of really bad beach days for people, or great days for Kemp's ridleys to nest.
So how do you have people that check the beaches? How do you know when there's been a nest? If they're so good at camouflaging it, how do you know a nest is there?
So we have a great dedicated group of volunteers that actually do our nesting beach surveys every day of the nesting season. So May 1 through October 31, they're out there before sunrise so that they can drive down the beach and look for signs that sea turtles have been up onto the beach. And so when they approach a sea turtle crawl, each species kind of walks a little bit differently, and their crawls are a little bit different sizes. And so that's one way that you can figure out what species came up onto the beach. And one of the things about sea turtles, like some other reptiles, is that they have fixed action patterns. And so what that means is they kind of do the same thing in the same order every time. And so they'll always make a body pit, and then they'll make an egg chamber, and then they'll cover up their nest. But actually 50% of the time, generally, a female will come up on the beach, and then for whatever reason, she'll decide this isn't the spot for her, the sand's too dry, too hard, and she'll actually turn around and go back in the water and come back up either that night or a subsequent night in a different spot. She's just trying to find the right place to put her eggs. And so the volunteers will find a crawl, they'll evaluate whether that crawl was a nest or a false crawl or a non-nesting emergence, and then they'll record all the information for that crawl, and if it's nest, they'll mark it off so that it's protected and people know not to put their chairs or beach umbrellas there. And then they'll continue on moving down the beach and then counting and enumerating and recording all the data for all the crawls they have for that day.
Now, if someone wanted to be a volunteer or find out more about the statistics of all this, where would they go to do that?
So we have our two groups that kind of monitor our nesting beaches. So we have one north of the Ponce de Leon Inlet called Volusia Turtle Patrol. And so they can check with them about the volunteer opportunities they have on our kind of North County beaches, north of the inlet. And then south of the inlet, we have the New Smyrna Beach Turtle Trackers that surveyed down there. And we also have a bunch of information on nesting, on kind of our beach natural resources that folks can find out from our county website at volusiaseaturtles.org.
Okay. What else other than sea turtles do you watch out for when you're on the beach?
So besides sea turtles, which are kind of sometimes the most emblematic species that we have on the beach, one of the others are something that a lot of folks overlook when they go to the beach for the day, and that's our shorebirds. And so sometimes that comes in two different flavors depending on what time of year you're looking in. So during the winter, like we're in now, we'll have some of our winter migrants. So we'll have some interesting gulls that show up to the area, as well as one of our really important protected species on our Volusia County beaches, and that's the piping plover. They're a very small shorebird. They're pretty much only about that tall, and they're the epitome of a snowbird. So they like to breed in the northern parts of the U.S. and in Canada, and then when it gets too cold, they'll migrate down to a variety of areas further south, including our Florida beaches in Volusia County. And while they're here, they're kind of just trying to eat anything they can find to build up their energy reserves for the next breeding season. And so folks may see them, piping plovers have a really interesting feeding pattern that you'll see them running down the beach, and then they'll kind of use one of their legs to dig into the sand to find their food. And they will sometimes, depending on what breeding area they're coming from, have a little bit of jewelry on them. So people will put bands around their legs. They're kind of just little bracelets that are either have a color, or they're a metal band, or they have a little flag on them. And those don't hurt the bird at all, but they kind of give us a clue as to what breeding area they came from, or even what individual it was. And sometimes researchers can track those all the way through time. So, that's this one bird that came from Sleeping Bear Dunes near the Great Lakes, and it's the parent of these other three birds. And so it's really valuable information both for researchers and for conservationists. Besides our wintering piping plovers, we also have, excitingly, we have nesting shorebirds on our beaches. And so sometimes we'll have least terns and black skimmers nesting, but kind of the most common nesting species we have on our beaches are Wilson's plovers. And so they're a little bit bigger than piping plovers, but when I say big, it's shorebird big. So, they're maybe about that tall. And Wilson's plovers will start nesting around March into the early months of the summer. And they are ground beach nesting birds, which looks a lot different than what most people think of when they think of a bird nest, collecting sticks and putting them in a tree. And so they're solitary nesters. So mom and dad pair up, and they basically just make a tiny little scrape in the sand, most of the time close by to the dune, and lay their very sand-colored eggs on the sand. And then mom and dad will take turns incubating the eggs and kind of guarding the territory. And if they feel like a predator or a person's getting too close, they'll actually do what's called a broken wing display. So they'll pretend like one or both their wings are broken, and they'll just kind of lead you away from their nest and then fly off perfectly fine. And so when those eggs hatch, they turn into these little tiny chicks that kind of look like if you took a cotton ball and added some toothpicks to it. Mm-hmm. And so those chicks will run around with mom and dad in the rack line, and kind of, hide from predators and until they can fledge and, fly off and live on their own. And so they're always really adorable. It's always a really fun sight to see. And so our office will monitor for that bird nesting. And then when we do see it or get a report of it, we will go out and just post the area with some stakes and flagging tape and some signs, just to let folks know that it's kind of a sensitive area and to stay out of that area so the birds can successfully nest and not get too stressed out by folks approaching their nesting habitat.
So if you see a bird acting funny on the beach, it's okay to make a phone call, but please leave the birds alone.
Yes, so leave the birds alone, and I would encourage folks to give our office a call if they see a shorebird doing something they would not expect a bird on the beach to do. So most of the time you're walking along the water line, you may see a bird that's going to slowly walk away from you. If you get too close, it'll fly away. If a bird is acting very agitated around you, yelling at you, especially pretending like one of its wings is broken, there's very likely a nest nearby. And so we would definitely encourage folks to let us know that, so we can get out there and make sure we're posting the area to protect those eggs and the nestling.
Now, what can we, as residents of Volusia County, do to help with the conservation efforts? I know keeping clean on the beach is an easy thing for us to understand. Clean up your trash, pick up your trash, don't leave your plastic behind. Do you see a lot of trash and things that are hurting the sea turtles?
So, debris and trash generally is a big issue for wildlife in general. And so kind of the catchphrase that we like to remind people of when it comes to sea turtles are to keep the beaches clean, dark, and flat. And so clean is a little bit easier for a lot of folks to realize. So when you're coming to the beach to enjoy your day, just make sure you're either packing out all of the debris or trash you may generate in your day, or putting it in the trash cans and recycling cans that are provided on the beach itself, to keep the beaches flat. So when folks do go to the beach for the day, they want to build sandcastles, they want to dig holes. That's completely understandable. But then we ask folks at their end of their day that they knock down their sandcastles, they fill in their holes, and they kind of leave the beach where they found it, so that when either a nesting female comes up onto the beach to lay her eggs, or a nest hatches and those hatchlings are trying to make their way to the water, they don't encounter unnecessary obstacles that are either going to trap them in some way or otherwise just kind of make their nighttime journey a little bit harder. And then finally, keeping the beaches dark. So sea turtles come out at night to both lay their eggs, as well as hatchlings emerge out of the ground at night to kind of evade predators and run down to the water. So on a completely natural beach, the hatchlings would find the water, which would be the brightest horizon, because you would have either moonlight or starlight reflecting off of the water surface. However, when we conduct activities or otherwise build buildings and things like that along our kind of beachscape, we need light to be able to see, but those lights can oftentimes confuse or disorient hatchlings, and if those lights are too bright or in a particular direction, it may confuse them and make them think the water is actually behind them in the dune. And that could lead them to, try to run back into the dune, get lost, potentially end up in roadways. And so we would encourage folks to just limit their use of flashlights on the beach if they don't need them, or to use a red filtered either flashlight or headlamp if they do need illumination. And especially for our beachside residents and our visitors to hotels, to make sure that all of your lighting fixtures on your home or dwelling comply with our Volusia County Sea Turtle Lighting Ordinance, which they can find on our website, as well as just making sure to draw your curtains or blinds at nighttime so that you can enjoy all the light you need inside your house without it kind of escaping onto the beachfront and potentially causing problems for hatchlings.
Do you want to say your website again, and do you have a phone number that you want to provide, or should they just go online?
Sure thing. So our website is Volusia Sea Turtle. Sorry.
Okay.
The website is volusiaseaturtles.org, and you can find all of our contact information on the website, as well as really good information for anyone who wants to know more about sea turtles and our shorebirds, as well as our habitat conservation plan.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
You're very welcome.
If you want to learn even more about sea turtles, don't forget, stop by your favorite library branch. Thanks again.
Thank you.